You'd all stand for the blessing before the reading of the Torah.
Baruch Yahweh Hamivarak Le'olam Vahed. Baruch Atah Yahweh Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bakar Banu Mikol Ahamim Venatan Lanu Et Torato Baruch Atah Yahweh.
Blessed are you, Yahweh, our Elohim, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all peoples and given us his Torah. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. Amen. You may be seated.
The sixth reading from the book of Genesis is named Todolt, which means generation. It is so named because the Torah portion begins with the words, "Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac." Todolt tells us the story of the birth of Jacob and Esau and their struggle for the birthright and blessing of the father, Isaac. We also learn about Isaac's trials and difficulties in the land of Canaan. The portion concludes with Jacob's deception of Isaac in order to procure the family blessing. Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, "If it is so, why then am I this way?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples shall be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger."
So again, a repeat of what happened with Abraham. Not as long of a time, but after they're married, they wait 20 years before she's able to conceive. And we have to consider, we're going to see that this is a reoccurring pattern among the patriarchs. When she feels this contention inside her womb, they didn't have sonograms or ultrasounds. And there's been talk that the contention had to do with being in the land of Canaan, and when she would walk past an area there were people who feared Yahweh, she would be kicked violently on one side. And when she was in an area where they were idol worshipers, she might be kicked violently on the other side. And this was very confusing to her. So she went to the Lord and asked. And one of the things that comes out here is that she learns from Yahweh that she does have two nations within inside her. And it's important that we recognize that she's been given the word that the older will serve the younger. And later on, when we look at this study through our English-speaking and Western minds, we may have misinterpreted some of the descriptions of Esau and Jacob.
Now the first came forth red, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. And afterward his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
So the boys are born, and Esau is described as being a man of the field. In some translations, you'll see that he's also considered a wild man. We consider a man of the field, we're looking at, Paul Bunyan or the brawny towel guy, the man's man who's out there leading the charge. But the indications are more that he was a wild man and undisciplined and not given to responsibility. And Jacob, it says he lives in tents and he's a mild and smooth, peaceful man. In our Western mind, we're looking at him as, well, he's a mama's boy. And, he doesn't have any leadership skills or the things that you would naturally follow. It's also believed that when they talk about him being in tents, he's actually in tents studying God's law before the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. And he was reportedly studying with Shem and Eber, who definitely knew, even though they didn't have Leviticus yet, but Noah knew what Yahweh wanted, how Yahweh wanted us to live our lives. And they didn't have the scriptures per se to go back and read because they hadn't been written yet, but they knew what Yahweh wanted, and that's what he was doing and studying. So our perception may have been a little bit skewed, and one of the things that lends a lot of credibility to this is why Yahweh told Rebekah that the older would serve the younger. It's not, at least in our way of thinking, that would be the normal course of things. However, Isaac was not the firstborn either. Ishmael was the firstborn, and the blessing and the leadership went to Isaac. Yes.
And when Jacob had cooked the stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was famished, and Esau said to Jacob, "Please let me have a swallow of that red stuff there, for I am famished." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "Behold, I am about to die. So of what use is this, then, the birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "First swear to me." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
So in this passage, we're looking at what Esau said. And how many of us have ever said something like, "I'm starving to death"? Okay? That takes a long time to starve to death. However, that's something that's said. So it's one way to look at this, especially in our Western mind, is he wasn't being serious. He just came in and he was hungry and he wanted to eat. And his statement was, "I'm starving to death." And then the exchange of, "Well, sell me your birthright." "Yeah, sure, whatever, man. What is it to me? I'm starving to death. Birthright won't do me any good." Well, that does seem a little cavalier to be put in the scriptures, that there's not a lot of comedy in the scriptures. But if we look at what the meal was, and it was lentil stew. And at that time, and now even in the Hebrew mindset, lentil stew was the first meal that you give to someone who's in mourning over a death. And this is approximately the time where Abraham would have passed. And if it wasn't Abraham, someone in the family was mourning, and that's why lentil stew was being prepared. Now, why would Esau not have been with the nuclear family during this time? Why was he out hunting? And there are translations and interpretations that suggest that he wasn't out hunting wild game. He wasn't out for venison. He was out hunting a person. And when we even look at David, why wasn't David allowed to build the temple? Because he was a man of violence. And so that honor passed from him to Solomon. So this particular passage seems to make Jacob sound like a swindler trying to pull a fast one, when that may not have been the case whatsoever. Jacob appears to have been responsible and taking care of the family. And if the birthright was Jacob's by Yahweh's statement to Rebekah, then what he's doing is not deceptive at all. It's what he was supposed to do to carry out the word of Yahweh.
Now there was a famine in the land, besides the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham."
So for last week's Torah portion, we found that Isaac never left the promised land. And his father did not want him to leave, because where his ancestral home was quite a distance. And he knew that for him to do his part in Yahweh's work, they had to possess the land, and that taking a wife from that land, and that the Canaanites would eventually be disposed, that his son would have to go, Isaac would have to go with them. And he needed to stay in God's promised land. That was the first time. So this is the second time, and if we're looking at ourselves through our eyes, choosing a wife is pretty important, and you probably would like to have some input into that, even though that was not the custom at the time. And this time, there's a famine in the land, and people are starving, and we would most likely want to go where there's food. And in this day and age, we can see that now. How you drive past one of the schools that's passing out discounted or free food, and there's long lines of people in line, and they're not the homeless people that are predominantly there. They're people driving up in their cars, staying in their cars, some of them nice cars, and they get their food and they bring it home. So for Isaac to remain in the land because God told him that he would provide for him, again, that takes a step of faith. And he's trusting God more than he's trusting his own instincts or desires to eat. We might ask ourselves, what would we have done? You know, what do we see? You know,
So Isaac lived in Gerar. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, "She is my sister," for he was afraid to say my wife, thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. And it came about, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife Rebekah. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Behold, certainly she is your wife. How then did you say, she is my sister?" And Isaac said to him, "Because I said, lest I die on account of her." And Abimelech said, "What is this that you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech charged all the people, saying, "He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death."
So again, what happened with the father is happening with the son. We look at generations, you know, and look at the patterns that are developing. It's hard to escape that. And sometimes, you know, when we first read through this, you know, our mind might be like, "Oh, we already heard this story." Well, yeah, we already heard this story, but the names were changed to protect the guilty. Also, in this section, it's the first time that we hear the phrase that Yahweh says, I will uphold this covenant with Isaac, who stayed in the land, because his father Abraham kept my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So how many other times do we hear that same statement stated in the Brit Hadashah in the New Testament, where Christ says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments, obey my statutes, and hold to my laws." So Abimelech learns about it's not his sister, but his wife, and he's heard about this thing before, and it didn't work out well, so he's a little upset with Isaac for this deception. And his default is to bless him and allow him to be there. And Isaac sowed seeds in the fields.
Now Isaac sowed in that land, and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man became rich, and continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy. For he had possessions of flocks and herds, and a great household, so that the Philistines envied him.
100-fold, okay? He believed, and he stayed. He didn't go to Egypt. He stayed in the land. And he sowed his fields, and it yielded 100-fold. Do we have any idea how much that is during a famine? And you know, famine's usually brought on by drought. If you plant a seed and you get 100 harvested plants from that one seed, how much do you really have? A lot. And so Abimelech sees this and realizes that this is not normal. This man has been blessed by his God, by Yahweh. And that gives him prestige. He's probably either selling and or giving food to the inhabitants there. And it's been beneficial to Abimelech that Isaac is there. However, once you start having a lot more than other people around, that usually engenders envy, and that's what happens next.
Now all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines stopped up by filling them with the earth. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are too powerful for us." And Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there.
So he starts to move on. They had made this covenant with Abraham, but their covenant did not extend to the generations that followed. And they had decided that once Abraham was gone, they no longer had to honor that agreement with Abraham's heirs. Not unusual for the pagan cultures that existed there. If they've made a deal, once one of the deal makers is gone, that ends the deal. And they stopped up the wells.
Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the same names which his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of flowing water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, "The water is ours." So he named the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over it too. So he named it Sitnah. And he moved away from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he named it Rehoboth. For he said, "At last the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land."
So the first well that they dug, that he named Esek, the meaning of Esek is to argue or quarrel or contend over. This has been equated to the buildings and the destructions of temples. The second well, Sitnah, the root word in the Hebrew is also the root word for accuser, adversary, strife, and Satan. So the second well, who is the accuser? It's Satan. And he felt at that time very pressured. He did not have a clear edict from the Lord to stay, so he was already told to sojourn, so he moves again. And they dig the third well that he called Rehoboth, which means wide spaces, and that the Lord Yahweh had given them or made room for them to settle and to live.
Then he went up from there to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham." So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well.
So again, we see he's doing what his father did, right? He builds an altar and names this well and stays. This seems to like it could have ended at least part of the story right here. However, it continues.
Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with the advisor Ahuzzath and Philcol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you?" And they said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you." So we said, "Let there now be an oath between us, even between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord." Then he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. And in the morning they arose early and exchanged oaths. Then Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. Now it came about on the same day that Isaac's servants came in and told him about the wells which they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day.
So here you are, you're Isaac, you've been forced to leave after you produced 100-fold. You're kicked out and sent out to wander on your own. You dig one well, and the people that kick you out chase you over to where that well is, and they say that it's ours, and they claim it from you and force you to leave again. So you do. You go, you find another one, you dig another well, and they come up and accuse you again and cause you more strife, and force you to move a third time. You go a third time, you dig a well. Apparently it's far enough away that the logistics don't get the pursuers to go after you because it's worth, you're more trouble than it's worth to them. And you, again, are prosperous through Yahweh. He blesses you, and you start to have an increase. And now, once that's seen by the people that kicked you out and chased you away 2 different times, they come up and say, "Let's make a peace because we have done you no harm." And what would we be thinking at this point? You've done us no harm? And that's what we would think. But apparently Isaac is of a mind that you can't really do anything to me because Yahweh is doing things for me and for us. So he has no problem with this pact, this covenant with these people that we would think, we'd be planning a way to trap them or to get back or exact our revenge against these people that have obviously taken what we have built, dug, planted. They've just come in and taken it over, and we've lost it. But Isaac's frame of mind is, yeah, you did that, and the Lord just keeps blessing us. So we're going to do what we keep doing and follow the instructions that we have, and we'll make this pact and send you away so that we don't continue down this road.
And when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Baseth, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
So again, we're going to see the differences between Esau and Jacob. It was important enough for Abraham for him to get a wife for Isaac, not from the land that they were living in, but to go back to his ancestral home and bring someone else here. So that was obviously important to Isaac and his wife. And then they have one of their sons that disregards that and takes 2 wives from this pagan idol-worshiping country. And it causes them distress in the family.
Now it came about when Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." And he said to him, "Here I am." And Isaac said, "Behold, now I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your gear and quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare a savory dish for me, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die."
So Isaac is losing his eyesight, and believes he's going to die. He doesn't die for quite a while after this. And again, this is where we're going to start to get into perceptions of Esau and Jacob. So Esau goes out and he goes to hunt. But while this discussion was taking place, someone else was listening to the conversation.
So just to paraphrase what happens here, Rebecca hears him send Esau out to hunt and decides to have her son Jacob prepare a meal. She goes and gets a lamb from the flock and prepares this meal. And I remember that Jacob says, but what if he notices by my skin that he doesn't notice my scent and the hair of my skin? What if he notices? They decide amongst themselves to send the younger in to get the blessing while Esau is out hunting. And so what seems like deception is put together by them. Jacob is able to come in with prepared food, and he wears, and he disguises himself as if he were his brother Esau.
So Jacob's not to prepare the meal. Why? I thought he was, the mama's boy. I thought he was the one who made soup and stew and things. Well, apparently he was skilled enough to be able to make lentil soup, but his mother didn't think that he could prepare this meal for his father. So she instructs him to go out and get the lamb and bring it back, and she will prepare the savory dish as she knows her husband likes. This is now troubling to Jacob, because it's obvious in the exchange that they have that he is not comfortable with what he's seeing as a deception. We do not know what Rebecca has told anyone about the conversation or the instructions that she received from the Lord. We do not know if he was told that his brother will serve him, that they will be two separate nations. We don't know if she told her husband. It doesn't appear that way. However, later on, there's a question that he asks that Isaac asks that may indicate that he knew something was up. But some of the translations will even call the passage of the blessings, which comes next, the stolen blessing. Well, if Yahweh gives the blessing and intends it, the person that he intended for it can't have stolen it, because it was already his. And even though Jacob at this time is thinking that he's going to create this deception, he doesn't know that he's just doing what Yahweh has already decided would happen. And just like the first time when Ishmael was the firstborn and Isaac got the blessing, again, we're going to see a repeat of this story.
So he came close and kissed him. When he smelled the smell of his garments, he blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my own son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Now may God give you the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and an abundance of grain and new wine. May people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you."
So he's now received the blessing that Isaac believed was supposed to go to his oldest son. And it's gone to Jacob. And we're going to see Jacob is going to be troubled by this as it continues. But again, what was, we would call it commander's intent. What was the intent to happen here? Was it that Esau would become one of the patriarchs? Apparently not. Yahweh did not have that in mind.
Now it came about just as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had hardly gone out from before the presence of Isaac his father, and Esau his brother came in from his hunting. Then he also made savory food and brought it to his father, and he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." And Isaac his father said to him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." Then Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was he then that hunted game and brought it to me, so that I ate of all of it before you came and blessed him? Yes, and he shall be blessed."
So now he has an idea of what happened. Isaac has an idea of what happened. And Esau is upset. He's outraged. And he's feeling, well, he sold his birthright already, and that made him angry with his brother. And now this has happened. And this kind of thinking, if we're looking at it in the Western mind again, leads to the stereotype of the Jewish Hebrew people as being swindlers and always looking to cut an edge and get some gain from someone else. But again, if it's God's will and his design, it was Jacob's from the beginning. Isaac knows he cannot give the same blessing a second time, and the blessings for the firstborn were very important. They got a double portion above all the other siblings. So he still blesses Esau.
Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling, and away from the dew of heaven from above. And by your sword you shall live, and your brother you shall serve. But it shall come about, when you become restless, that you shall break his yoke from your neck." So Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning of my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob."
So Esau thinks his father's dying right now because of his blindness. And he's made this oath that as soon as his father, he can't kill his brother Jacob now while his father still lives. But once his father dies, he intends to kill his brother. But Isaac is going to be around for quite a number of years after this. And it allows these two nations, these two peoples, to become strong separately, because Jacob will be leaving for a while.
So Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, "You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and from there take yourself a wife from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you become a company of peoples. May he also give you the blessing of Abraham to you and to your descendants with you, that you may possess the land of your sojournings, which God gave to Abraham." Then Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padan Aram to take to himself a wife from there. And that when he blessed him, he charged him, saying, You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Padan Aram. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan displeased his father Isaac, and Esau went to Ishmael and married, besides the wives that he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth.
So the blessing that Esau got from Isaac, one of the things that sticks out is that he's going to rule with the sword. The sword is very important to what is going to happen with Esau and his descendants. And Esau, being the firstborn, is seeking an ally. And that ally is Ishmael. And the nations that came out of this alliance between Ishmael and Esau are the Arab nations that are still there. And when they talk about contending with each other, we think of the Arab nations, against the Jewish nation. But the Arab nations, they've been at war with each other continuously. It is their culture, this blessing that they were given, that he will rule with the sword. It's not escapable. That they're a warring people. And we can see that what's going on now is not new. It started back then with these commands, blessings, and the way the nations have come together. So now Jacob is going back and going to find Laban, who we saw last week, and he'll come up again. And Laban may not have thought he got a good deal the first time when Rebekah left. He got some gifts, but he's seen this huge increase that Isaac had, and there's no indication that Laban's family has been elevated to that same level. So he may be looking to extract a little bit more. We're about 5 minutes ahead. If there's questions, I will try to answer.
There were a couple things that stuck out when you were talking. This 100-fold blessing. I was at church in Albany once, and this gentleman showed me what it means when you fold. So let me just demonstrate. So there's one fold. I have two. There's two folds. I have four. If I fold it again, I have 8. So the blessing of a 100-fold is an exponential blessing. And I wanted to read something regarding the Word of God, how you brought up that Jacob went in and dwelled in tents. Still others, like seed sown among the thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Others, like seed sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, 30, 60, and even 100 times what was sown.
Something else that sticks out is, for some reason, we're left with the impression that living in a tent is somehow lower than the man of the fields. Well, what was the tabernacle? Who else was perfectly satisfied with the covering of a tent? And we see these, again, it's another shadow, it's another picture. Now, I don't have the scripture to back up what some of the rabbis have said, but they equate the wells with the temples. They equate Essek with Solomon's temple, Sitnah with Herod's, which, all right, so if Solomon's was quarreling and Sitnah was Herod's, and the third temple, Raboth, will be God's temple. No quarreling, and there's room for us. So whether that's correct or not, I really don't know. But it is interesting to think about. If you'd stand for the blessing after the reading of the Torah.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I think that it was Yahweh's intention all along that Jacob would get the blessing and the birthright. It goes all the way back to the womb, and there was contention there. And when the kids were born, it says that Jacob grabbed the heel of Esau, and it's widely speculated among the rabbis that Esau was actually trying to do him much harm, because we know we have a soft spot on our head when we're born, and Esau was trying to kick him. And so Jacob reached and grabbed the heel of Esau to keep him from suffering that kind of harm. So because of that contention, Esau was the firstborn. He, more or less crowded out Jacob. So later, the tables were turned.
So one thing I've really been thinking about, and through study, I kind of got this. There's kind of a couple quick testimonies. I've been watching the History Channel and a lot of things about the great battles that are American history. And some of the greatest battles, you guys, were when the retreating army decided, you know what, nope, I'm going to stop, I'm going to turn, and I'm going to attack. And I want to tell you a story. I stayed in Amity when I was 18 for a summer. And I was out one Friday night boxing with my little brother in the street. And this guy in the corner that didn't really like us, that was kind of our adversary, came out to try to break it up. And we were getting the dukes. But when this other opponent came out to challenge, he was after my little brother. We stopped fighting each other. We got shoulder to shoulder, and we faced that guy. And so we have a real opportunity right now with what's going on. And this is defining times in our lives. And I know for a fact that when we have our eyes on the focus, if we know, Mike, that it's Satan causing contention, accusing, causing us to be adversarial, causing strife, then we know what our enemy's tactics are. And instead of any kind of contention with my brothers and sisters, what an opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder, proclaim the gospel. There's a word that I've been getting all week. Therefore, this is directly from the Lord's mouth. Therefore, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every living creature. We're just in that place. So let's get shoulder to shoulder. Let's turn from our retreat and let's attack. Let's get shoulder to shoulder and face the enemy together.
Anyone else?
Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Together. Baruch Shemo
Note HaTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. Amen.